Thank you to the band. Good morning.
Good morning.
Grace to you, peace to you, welcome to you. I call your attention to announcements. They are listed here in the what is this called? The Nuggets. It's called the Nuggets. Thank you. And just want to lift up a couple of things. One is that the friendship, ritual of friendship pads. It's called a ritual because we do it every week. It's called friendship pads because the idea is that you sign them and you have your name and contact information, but also then you pass it on to someone else. It's able to not just, here, sign this, but you can say, hi, good morning. So it kind of encourages some contact and connection. And then when you're done, and it's on that end, pass it all the way back to this end so that it makes it easier for the ushers to pick up. And we appreciate that. And it also gives you another opportunity to say, didn't we just say hi? Yes, we did. And so then you get to say hi again. All right. So it's a ritual of friendship. All right. Also, we have sign-ups for Family Promise. Starting next Sunday, Family Promise will be here. And we've done pretty well in filling out a lot of the places that work that needs to be done. But we are looking for sign-ups for overnight hosts. We need people to stay the night. It's called a real big pajama party. So we hope that you can be a part of that. Take a look at what's going on there. And then it says, please return borrowed items. Hold on, I got to read this. Hey, if you borrowed something from the church, bring it back, okay? Okay, all right. There you go. And then this Thursday night at Hope State, we will be having kind of a cookie thank you orientation, and also get your feedback for when we hosted 104 asylum seekers. There was a lot of work that was done, and so we want to be able to share your experience and learn from that last experience, because we anticipate that there will be more to be done as the weeks and months unfold. And so we just want to be ready. But for Thursday night at 7 o'clock, come to Smith Hall, get a cookie, and know we are grateful to you. So please come to that. And then pledge cards are due back next Sunday. Please take a look at that. And we hope that that this time, this series that Abbott came up with, I'm all in, and that this has been a time for you to be thoughtful about your stewardship of your own life, as well as your gifts and your gifts to the church. And then finally, yesterday we were busy here yesterday. We had a baptism in the morning. We had about 50 people here for that. And for Della Chelsea Paul. She is the granddaughter of one of our neighbors out here. And we were glad to have this ceremony, this time of joy with her family. We had that baptism. And then at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, we had a celebration of life for Sandy Long's father. And we were able to provide a place, again, of comfort and connection and fellowship, and to celebrate the life of her father. And flowers up here are part of that celebration. And then I understand that the flowers right here, Judy Schwiebert, you brought these in. And thank you for that. Okay. All right. Take a deep breath. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful that you're here. I hope that we are grateful to each other in the way that we can encourage each other in our time together. I wish you peace, and know that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
Please stand as you're comfortably able and join me as we enter into worship. We come as we are.
Anxious and lost.
We come as we are.
Hiding and seeking.
We come as we are.
Fulfilled and rejoicing.
We come to the rock.
Singing and rejoicing.
Please stand if you're comfortably able and continue by singing our faith, walls mark our boundaries.
Take a deep breath. And I don't know if it's a gift to you. I hope that it is. But I'll tell you, it is always a gift to me and for me when I'm able to pray with you. It is a high, high honor. So let us pray. Spirit of life and love, God of every name and no name and beyond all names, this source of energy and love in our lives. You are the God of all seasons and all moods, of all people. And so in this time, I don't know what mood everyone has showed up in. But if we need to be lifted from depression or anger, uncertainty, doubt, we pray in this time of fellowship and spirit that we would be lifted. Our mood will be changed. That we may see ourselves as part of a new way of being in the world. That we may be a gift to one another. And so, we're grateful for a time of quiet and some storytelling and some sharing, some laughter, maybe some tears. Who knows how the Spirit moves among us and which way the wind blows. But this moment, this day, help us to look around and to see beyond ourselves and beyond words and beyond roles and beyond past hurts and beyond future worries, and help us to be in this moment. May all the people say, amen. Well, this is the time in our service where we lift up celebrations of our lives. That can be a birthday, it can be an anniversary, perhaps a moment of grace. Perhaps you were surprised by a word of encouragement. Perhaps some kind of wonderful thing was hiding right around the corner and you walked by and it goes, hey! And you were grateful for that. It is the Spirit of life and love working in our lives and working in the world. If you have such a celebration, I encourage you to stand and let an usher come to you with a microphone so that we can all hear it, because then it gets shared. Gene.
I'm Gene McWhorter, and this is my wife, Cindy. And I'm happy this morning that Cindy was able to lift her right arm above her head to wash her own hair, because Thursday at work, she believes she may have suffered a rotator cuff injury. And for anybody that's ever had one of those, it's horrible. But she slept through the night last night, and she actually got herself dressed as well. So I'm happy that she's here with us. Just don't squeeze her too hard today, please.
All right. Thank you. We're grateful for that. Okay. Susan.
I'm Susan Liddell, and I'm here to celebrate a member of our congregation, Roger LaBresh. He is an iron worker artist, and if you don't know him, he's the person that just made the beautiful Wedgeblade sculpture that graces our campus. And he has been invited to participate in a competition, and it will be televised on Forged in Fire this Wednesday, and it's on the History Channel. So I hope those of you that know him will be able to tune in. Those of you that don't know him, I invite you to tune in. He's a marvelous, masterful artist, and I've never even seen the show, but I think it will be fun to watch.
It will be fun. He is incredible, yeah. Right. Enika.
Yes, I'm Enika, and greetings from my husband, Rob Adam. And he gave me good news because he went to see the doctor about his knee, and he is getting a new one has to wait till the 26th of November, which is nothing really, because some people I hear over there wait for surgery sometime for 3 months. So, but they put the pressure on that he has to come back here, so that helps.
All right.
So,
Very
anyway,
good.
greetings from Rob.
Thank you for that. All right, Steve.
Steve Barrow, I'd like to thank all my family that has called me and helped me celebrate my 15th birthday. That happened on Friday. And you're all looking at me saying 15. Yeah. And from my wife and my son who lives with us for keeping me straight and on the narrow as I get used to using this device that I'm now forced to use. And for the Shadow Rockers who give me support and make me laugh when we come to church about life and what's going on.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Irene.
Hi, I'm Irene. I'm celebrating the fact that my sister is here from Florida with me, and she's 2 months post-op on the same heart valve replacement as I had, except she's one up on me. She's already had her second heart valve replaced.
All right. It's not a competition, is it? Okay. All right. All right. Good.
My sister is in need of prayers in Wisconsin. She's in the hospital right now. On a happy note, my husband did have a birthday this week, but he doesn't tell anybody.
Okay. Yes, it is not Ken who's up in the balcony. It's not his birthday. Don't tell him. Okay. All right. Hey. Sharon.
Good morning, I'm Karen, and I have our Whole Lives celebration and update for you all. Last week, Sunday evening was our guest panel, and that means in late September I write this awkward email. Dear gay, lesbian, bi, trans, and queer friends, please come talk about your lives with some strange teenagers. And they do. That's really wonderful. It's a gift to the kids. There's some kind of awkward silence where the kids are like, don't look at me, don't look at me, I don't have a question. But it's still a great evening together. And in November, I'm meeting with some other Our Whole Lives trainers and educators to talk about a steady schedule of OWL trainings for the Phoenix area with our friends at UCC and Valley UU in Chandler, and we're going to make it happen. It's going to be awesome.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Janet.
Yes, hi. I shared with you a couple weeks ago that I'd had the eye hemorrhage, and I'm celebrating that that's better. However, when I went to the doctor this past week, I now have a detached retina that will be fixed. So
All right.
I think it'll be okay.
You will. Well, thanks for sharing so we can add our prayers to yours. Thank you. All right. Judy.
Okay, so I'm celebrating 5 birthdays in a 1-month period in our family. My daughter-in-law, Caroline, my other daughter-in-law, Allison, and my 2 grandkids, Luke and Maya, and Andy. So yay for high birthday season. And then one other thing that I just want to lift up. On Tuesday, my organization, the one I co-founded with Mickey, Desert Progressives Indivisible, is meeting here in Smith Hall, and we're going to have AZ Ed 101 here, a nonpartisan group that talks all about education in Arizona, how we got here where we are, and the implications of passing or not passing the propositions on the ballot. So everybody is invited to please join us. 6:30 for ice cream, 7 o'clock for the program.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here today, and I need to say that last week was the Canadian Thanksgiving, but
Yes.
this really adds to it. So it's so wonderful to be in this room, praying with all of you, and seeing some friends that I really love and miss. Yes. And thank you, Ken, for staying in touch.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Not just Ken, but
Well,
others. Thank
yeah.
you. Everyone at Shadow Rock.
Well, welcome home. All right. Dr. Clark.
So I had a delightful experience yesterday. I went to Lucha. How many of you know about Lucha? Okay, it stands for Living United for Change in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
And this activity was hosted by the Latino community, and it was a public assembly. to get out the vote. The vote, that's my Minnesota. And they had wonderful Mexican food, as they know how to eat. And I want to announce that after church at 11:45, at their office, which is near Bethany and 19th Avenue, at 11:45, they're going to have more Mexican food for free, and they're going to have David Garcia answering questions. So, and this is today after church. So, si se pueda, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let's go up here. Marilyn?
Greg and I are very pleased and happy to have with us my second cousin, Gail, and we've just talked and told stories and had a wonderful time together.
Good. Hey, Gail. Welcome. Good to meet you. Okay. June?
Yes, I have one concern, and that's my great-grandson, who's 3 years old, had a ruptured appendix last Monday. They were able to clean it up and put a stent in, and he's got to wait 6 weeks to be operated on.
Okay.
I'm celebrating Charlie's life. It will be 5 years on Thursday that he's transitioned. And a few years before he passed, he gave the choir this rendition that we're going to sing of Amazing Grace. He was a choral director, and he looked through a lot of music and found something more upbeat. And so we're going to sing for him.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Sharon Ray.
Sharon Ray, I just had to jump up after Susan gave her announcement about Roger, because I have in my living room a lamp that Roger made for me, and I'm so excited that he's going to be on that show. I looked all over for a Southwestern lamp, and I couldn't find it any place, and I called Roger, and he made exactly what I wanted. It's fabulous, and now I own a Roger LaBrash original.
Amen. Amen. So many gifts. So many gifts. Gordon.
Hi, I'm Gordon Schneider. I had a little bit of fun last night volunteering for Phoenix Restoration Project. There was a ice drop-off of about 40 people down at the Tonatiuh Community Center down on 7th Street. And they were basically looking for drivers to take people to homes, and so I went down to help there. I took some food down as well. And they ended up having 9 totally new families step forward to offer overnight shelter. And it's pretty remarkable, I think.
Yeah.
And at the end, I didn't end up taking anyone anywhere, so I just was there.
Yep.
Tell things.
You're
But
part
it
of the
was
party.
good.
Part of the party.
I was.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right. Carolina.
I'm Carolina. I'm so glad you were there, Gordon, last night, because I was not there. Because I am from an organization called Allies for Racial Equity, which is a white ally group doing anti-racism work, primarily in Unitarian Universalism, but everywhere else too. We have our annual retreat here, so I have a house full of people already. Usually I do hosting for Phoenix Restoration Project, so I'm so glad people really stepped up to do that, and we're getting more hosts. I want to say, first of all, thank you for Shadow Rock. I'm so grateful that you're sharing our space with us for our third part of our retreat, which we'll be having after the service today. And also, I had been offering hospitality to a Venezuelan family who are really in a lot of trouble. The system is really, really a mess. And someone or someones from Shadow Rock donated $1,000 to this family to help them out. And I want to say thank you very much for your community. I understand we're like small groups of people trying to offer great resistance, and that will really, really help them, and I want to thank you on their behalf. So.
Thank you. All right. Yes, Peter.
Good morning, Peter Johnston, and I apologize for this celebration, but Jean Lefebvre, would you please stand? Jean McWhirter, would you please stand? Wearing blue, I introduce a pair of blue jeans.
Okay, let's sing our celebration song, please. Please.
I'm still laughing. Wait a minute, we're supposed to pray. You can do that with a smile. Do it with a smile. As a beloved community, we have shared our celebrations, grace-filled experiences, and concerns. And now I invite you in a spirit of discernment to look to the hills and the skies and the clouds, and to place your hands in your lap, open to receive the spirit of life and love in this time of prayer. Oh God, our lives are surrounded by walls. Some walls are good and strong and keep things in where they should be, but other walls keep people out and confine us. We confess too often we build walls made of fear, anger, misunderstanding, and hatred. Too often we build walls to protect ourselves from being hurt, from being changed, or from being vulnerable. In our blindness and prejudice, we forget the gates and the doors and the windows in our walls. Help us, Divine Spirit, to build walls that are freeing, walls that set boundaries of love and responsibility within which we may live and love and play. Help us, loving God, not to be so quick to judge others. Help us to not create boundaries that separate us from your love for us, but rather enable us to trust in your protective walls that you provide. For your protection never fails, and your divine walls of grace and love stand forever. Heal our judging spirits, we pray, and make us forgiving people, shaped within your transforming love. Be with us as we build up and take down the many walls in our lives. Grant us the wisdom to know when to construct, when to confront, and when to climb and when to dismantle, when to ignore and when to go around the wall of our lives. And help us to remember that some of our walls may actually be bridges, answers to unspoken prayer. Grant us courage in our discernment as we change and grow. And now, as participants in the work of the Spirit of life and love this day, we pray, our loving God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Our offerings for the celebration of life in this place and beyond shall now be received. We continue our celebration with the dedication of our offerings. Please join me. Our gifts have been collected and now presented in hope and thanksgiving. We offer them for the good of our neighbors, our city, and our world.
Good morning. We're taking today and the next 2 Sundays to work through a sermon series called Raise Your Voice. And we're familiar with this idea. We tell children to be seen and not heard. How well does that work out? We say, don't raise your voice at me, as we raise our voice at them. On the other hand, we may say to the same person, for God's sake, speak up. We often want to regulate the volume and the content, and when we want another person to speak, but we struggle to control our own tongue. A person named James, head of the first church in Jerusalem, wrote a letter to his congregation. He wrote that the tongue is like a bit in the horse's mouth, or it's like a rudder on a ship. And as the tongue goes, so goes a person's life. I quote, "The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." I personally like the tongue. This is the kind of thing that maybe gives churches a bad name. And yet there's some truth here. It is true that we must be careful how we use our voice. And so we may err on the side of actually losing our voice and not speak up when we should. So before you raise your voice, you must find your voice. And for this, I turn to the wisdom story of Esther. The story of Esther takes place in Persia. The Jewish people are in exile and homeless, but they try to make a home in a foreign land. Because they are in a foreign land and subject to the whims of people in authority over them, life is very iffy. And some rulers were wiser and kinder than others. The story of Esther was one of the most dangerous times for the Jewish people. And the story of Esther is actually R-rated. I'm going to try and give you a GP-13 version. The book of Esther begins with the queen disobeying the king's request to present herself to him and a bunch of drunken men. After partying for 7 days, the king expected her to show up wearing nothing but a crown and a smile. She refused the king and made him look bad in front of his friends. She found her voice. She took a stand. He said, "You need to come." But she persisted. She would not go. And she paid a price. The king, being a rather unstable autocrat without a mind of his own and afraid of what other people think about him, asked for advice. His advisor, being opportunistic, feeds on the king's insecurities and makes all these generalizations and universal statements. The advisor proclaims that the queen's refusal of the king will embolden all women everywhere to disobey their husbands, and that the king better nip it in the bud, or there will be apocalyptic results. Dogs and cats will start sleeping with each other. And now he needs to pick a new queen, and this is how Esther comes on the scene. The king eventually selects a good-looking, young, secretly Jewish woman who is a part of his harem to be the queen. As for Esther's backstory, she's an orphan who is raised by her older righteous cousin, Mordecai. When the king came looking for young virgins to fill the role of his new queen, Esther made sure to jump into the line. She wins favor with all the people in the harem. She got Miss Congeniality. And with the king himself. And becomes queen. Also, Mordecai helps uncover a plot to kill the king. Mordecai tells Esther. Esther tells the king is saved, and Mordecai gets brownie points. He is on the good side of the king and saves the king's life. But all is not well in the king's courts. Like a Game of Thrones, chaos is a ladder, and treachery is afoot. When Mordecai refuses to bow down to the evil counselor Haman in the street, the evil mustache-twisting counselor, and that is, he twists his own mustache. He doesn't go up and twist somebody else's. That would just be weird, right? Haman decides to engineer a plot to murder all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Please see a pattern here. One Jew refuses to bow down, therefore all Jews must die. Insecure people with power make generalizations and policy based on fear and lies. There's a long history of this. Haman's plot basically involves Haman going to the king and saying, I think we should kill all the Jews in the Persian Empire. And the king says, all right, what could it hurt? It doesn't affect my base. Haman walks away, twisting his mustache some more. Remember, his own mustache, not somebody else's. Glad that the king is supporting and not really thinking through Haman's genocidal plans. The king doesn't know that his own queen is Jewish because Esther's been keeping it a secret. But the threat of the genocide of the Jews moves Esther and Mordecai into action. Mordecai goes, wails outside the palace gates while wearing sackcloth. He's one of those protesters. And Esther fasts for 3 days before visiting the king. However, before Queen Esther finds her voice and speaks up, she and her cousin have a crucial come to Jesus conversation. Not literally come to Jesus because he hadn't been born yet, but a very serious conversation nonetheless. And this is in the Word about life. And then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. In other words, The law is what it is. It is the law. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's just. It doesn't matter what circumstances are behind it. It is the law. And only the king can make an exception. She goes on to say, I myself have not been called to come to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish with the rest of us. Who knows? Besides, perhaps you have come to royal dignity. Perhaps you were born for just such a time as this. And then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. Pray, pray, pray. I and my maids will also fast as you do, and after that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. I cannot read or think of this passage. Perhaps you were born for just such a time as this, without thinking of our good friend Paul Eppinger. He had said this to me a couple of times, and somehow in his voice it stuck with me in a way other times it did not. Just one of many gifts. The question is, what happened? What happened to the heart and the mind of Esther that moved her to find her voice and then raise her voice? What moved her to go from non-involvement to throwing herself into the middle of it? Esther's first thought was to keep her head low so that she could keep her head on. But something in Esther turned, and she raised her voice. She raised her voice for her sake and for the sake of her people. There are times in history and at our family gatherings when it is needful for us to speak up. I get the strong feeling to avoid conflict and the feeling that my one voice and my one vote doesn't count. I get the feeling that I do not want to complicate my life, and so I don't want to get involved. I also understand the feeling that in this chaotic world, we need a place of refuge and peace. But that is not an excuse for the church not to get involved. I understand it. But there is a counter-truth, and it is captured by the German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. And we know this poem. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. One of the interesting things about this poem is the way it changes depending on who uses it. Different groups have been added and taken out of the poem depending on the agenda of the person reading it. For example, when a U.S. congressman quoted it in the 1950s, he changed the word communist to socialist because socialists were a little bit easier to abide by than communists in the 1950s. And the original reference to the sick and the incurables, which Hitler would round up and take away because they were costing the state too much, that's been left out as well. The point is this: what every human being and human groups, whenever they have been singled out for persecution and identified by powerful people as expendable, they need our voice because it is the moral thing to do. But it is also the practical thing to do, because such evil practices flourish with our silence. And if we allow such practices, thinking that we are safely hidden in the king's palace, in the seat of power, in the seat of privilege, it is only a matter of time before we are found and treated like all the other so-called expendables. In Bill Smith's final sermon as senior minister at Shadow Rock, he talked about the long line of history of all the exciting times that he could have been born. He said, could I have been born in the time of the great prophets? No, God said no, not yet. Could I be born in the time of Jesus and the disciples and watch feed and be part of feeding the 5,000 and see the miracles? And God said, no, Bill, not yet. What about the time of Reformation? No, not yet. All those times he wished he could have been born. He imagined asking God at different points in time if he could be born during those times, but God said not yet. And finally, the time in history for Bill, the time for Bill to be in history, it came. Bill trusted that he was the right person at the right time. This was finally Esther's understanding. She came to understand that she was born at her particular time in history in order to raise her voice for her people. There's only one question. Is history calling you to raise your voice? Only you can answer that for yourself. It's between you, your conscience, and your God. I think history is calling us to raise our voice. Amen.
Please join me in our words for mission. Let us go forward, free to live outside the walls that isolate and fragment.
Let us live as wholly connected and beloved children of the Most Holy.
Please stand as we finish. These are the times.
We are the people.
All of creation is blessed.
May we love all and serve all.
May God be with you.
And also with you.
Amen.